Welcome to the Nebraska Soybean Board Weekly Market Roundup, being brought to you by Nebraska soybean farmers and their checkoff. I'm Susan Littlefield. As you can see, I'm on location in Kansas City, Missouri, where the U.S. Meat Export Federation wrapped up earlier on a Friday their spring session, a conference that took place and brought folks from all across the world to talk about what's happening for the proteins. But we're going to take a wide look at what's been happening in this market trade. We all know that the weather and the devastation, and our thoughts and our prayers go out to so many farmers out there that are dealing with tipped pivots, flooded fields, smashed out alfalfa, you name it, they're going through it. But we're going to take a look at that. How does that change when it comes to your marketing plans? We'll also take a look at seasonalities of what we see in the trade, a look a little bit at what's happening crop-wise, and of course, prevent plant, that talk, and replants. And then an interesting question that unfortunately has a little bit of a political side to it is, what happens if we end up in another tariff war with China? We've got a full packed report for today, so stick around.
Meet the champions of innovation in the heart of Nebraska. They're not just farmers, and they nurture more than just crops, pushing boundaries and turning challenges into opportunities. They trade knowledge and know-how, and their dedication doesn't end at harvest. It's in your every bite and every drive. The future of food, fuel, and fiber, and the future of Nebraska starts right here.
Welcome back once again. As you can see, joining me, we've got Darin Fessler. Darin is with Lakefront Futures, and Sue Martin with Ag and Investment out of Clarion, Iowa. And as I always like to do on this show, I like to have you give me just a nugget of what you saw as a market mover this week. And Darin, we'll start out with you.
I think it has to be wheat for me anyway. I think wheat has been a huge driver, whether it's a real move at this point or not, whether it's algo-driven, light volume, whatever it is, it's definitely leading way for some higher corn and bean, I think.
All right. And now, Sue, what about for you? What's the nugget you've been looking at?
Well, I have to agree with Darin. I think it was the wheat market this week, making new highs, aligning with the May expiration. You know, we've seen strong expiration by the March contract in March, and then the May finally, after, into early May, started to come around and meet that level that the March expired. And then we've seen the May expire very strong at 724. And then today we've seen the July contract align as well. So we're seeing the alignment. There's strength here. We're going into a long weekend. And the trade is going to be real interested when we come back to trade on Monday evening. What does the forecast hold going forward for the Black Sea region?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and that was going to be my next question. We know that the wheat market, especially Russia, has had a lot of market talk as of late. Do you see the concerns? I'll start with you, Sue, that's happening in Russia having an effect, and maybe some possibilities of some export opportunities coming to the States?
Oh, I think very much so. We have to keep in mind that it's been Russia that has undercut us in the world value for, since the war started in 21. And I think that we have, or 22, I should say. So we have to keep that in mind that now that they're on the other side of the fence, producing less. The last 2 or 3 years, they were at 91. They were expected to be around 93 million metric tons this year. It's not going to happen. And of course, those killing freezes, a lot of average guesses are around 86.5 million metric tons on Russia's production. But also it's the coarse grains, both countries, Ukraine and in Russia, that were suffering under that frost freeze. So that puts the U.S. in a better position now for global demand as it comes to the U.S. And then, of course, Brazil, Paranal has been harvesting, and there's reports that their yields are just very disappointing.
Darin, do you think we can take advantage of these global, I don't want to use the word turmoils, but all the frustrations that have been happening with these crops, whether it's wheat, corn, or beans? Can we take advantage of it and boost some export opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, to Sue's point, I think there's some opportunities here for the HRW markets, SR. It's just the thing is we haven't got that business yet. I mean, there are some legitimate issues. My question that I would ask the market, are we pricing in today a sub 80 million metric ton Russian crop? And I think we're pretty close to that, whether we're actually there or not. It seems like me, the market always tries to price a lot of this stuff in, maybe goes a little bit beyond where the reality of where it actually ends up being at. But there is legitimate concerns. There's dryness in southern Russia. We had the freeze in Russia. We have dryness in Ukraine. There's dryness in Australia. There's issues in France and Germany. It seems like here, if you look at year over year major wheat exporters, there's only 2 countries that have stocks-use ratios that are predicted to increase year over year. That's Ukraine, barely any, and the U.S. It has a stocks-use ratio of 40%. All these other ones are sub 10%. We're looking at the major wheat exporters, stocks use lowest since 2007. So yeah, there's legitimate concerns that, hey, we could be in the driver's seat for this business. If that's the case, it's hard to say that we can't see some higher corn values as well if wheat continues its momentum higher.
Where are we at seasonality? I want both of you to kind of give me your take on that. Sue, we'll start with you.
Well, seasonally, the wheat market first. Seasonally, by mid-May, it usually tends to trail off. But if you go back to years when Russia has had their issues, especially in the Volga River basin, there is an awful lot of wheat raised. 40% of the wheat for the country is in that area. And so when you have the weather in other years like this, it takes a little bit. You have to get into June and have it continue to remain dry and hot. And by the latter part of June, you're seeing the market really escalate. And we could still be looking at that to occur.
Darin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. The forecast right now is still showing some pretty dry conditions in Russia. And the question is that I would have is, if this is low volume, if this is momentum driven algos continuing to push this higher, again, it's, where's that next level? I guess I'm asking on the wheat market. And seasonality, Sue's spot on. I mean, usually we typically see a decline in the HR this time frame of year, but in corn, next 2-3 weeks might be the best opportunities we get this year if we see a little bit of rug pulled under the wheat market. Corn, obviously, we have some issues. It's not all hunky-dory. A lot of places we got plenty of moisture. Can we get it planted in a timely fashion? I don't think there's a concern on the planting of beans just yet. I'm more concerned about the bearish fundamentals, that if we get all this stuff planted and we continue to see declining meal market, meal hasn't broke just yet on front month. But if we start to see some CFR values out of China weaken with the bearish balance sheet that we're seeing in the U.S., doesn't really bode well that great for the U.S. bean market.
What about a bullseye perspective? Let's kind of bring it into where we're seeing in the Midwest and weather-wise. And we know the last week and a half has been detrimental to so many farmers. Tip pivots, alfalfa fields destroyed, replant that's going to have to happen after flooding. Darin, first with you. You've gotten some information out of Nebraska with some issues. Where do you see this crops going?
Yeah, if there's a bullseye area, I think it's Iowa. And I know I'm giving Iowa guys kind of the benefit of the doubt here, but there is a lot of pockets and holes, and there always is. But when you're talking this late, maybe the replant issues, I mean, I'm looking at Iowa, just the bulk of guys I work with there. It's hard to picture Iowa greater than 50% when those good excellent ratings start coming out. I think there's the crops in Nebraska, if you've avoided some of the wind and the hail recently, they look pretty good. And I think the crop as a nation will look good once it gets going here. I'm just concerned about, you're dragging Iowa along with it to the finish line here of planting, and you got Illinois maybe a little bit later than normal. How much is this rain really going to impact the plant at the end of the day? And the biggest concern I have for producers, if you have it in the ground, what conditions did it go in? And if it mudded in, you almost kind of continue to need that rain for, sidewall compaction or crusting. Y'all don't want the rain to stop right now. Just get it in the ground. It's kind of where my concern is for the producers on the planting side of things.
And so you're seeing it firsthand, being from Iowa. You're seeing the wetness and the issues that they're having as well.
Oh, absolutely. We had a little bit of planting going where guys were trying to mud it in over the past weekend. And then this week, not a wheel has turned. But, this equipment, once you can get in the field, and the forecast carries that we get past maybe Tuesday, we're to start turning warmer and drier. That should then allow for this planting to proceed very quickly, and we'll get the crop in. My concern is, first off, I'm not real crazy yet about selling the corn market. I believe that first off, you've got, like I say, around the world, the coarse grains, Ukraine, number 4 exporter in the world. And so, they look to me like they've got some issues on hand here that they're going to deal with. But more importantly, we get our crop in. I think what the weather does in June, does it continue to give us showers consistently to where these root systems don't really go down on corn? If that happens, and then you get into July and you turn hot and dry, well, first off, you're going to go into pollination. Last year, we had beautiful pollination. We had temperatures at night of 70 to maybe 72 degrees. And this year may be totally different where we have warmer nights. And if that all occurs, all of a sudden you're going to have a crop that could be in trouble very quickly. I think it's too soon to worry about hedging very aggressively here. We have indicators that we follow religiously. And on the longer term, we have one that if the right thing happens, the third one will finally, out of 3, turn positive at the end of May. I don't want to sell in front of that. And then you look at if the situation does stay hot in July, well, what about stocks to usage ratios? We could see a change in this whole scenario. But does that mean I'm bullish all the way into fall? Absolutely not. I would use these rallies, but I'm just not ready to do so yet.
So as we get ready to wrap up, we did have a question coming in from one of our viewers/listeners, and it talks about China and the U.S. And we know what the tariffs and that whole war situation did with us back a couple of years ago. They're worried that this tension is going to continue to build and we're going to see more tariffs put in place. What is your takeaway and how you see that possibly leaning heavy on these livestock and grain markets? Darin, I'll start with you. I know it's kind of a political, but what are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the aggression will have to be met somehow. And I think China, we look back to the 1819, what happened under the Trump administration. I think the same thing could potentially happen. And not only that, you still have the supposed bird flu issue that could be the overlinging dark cloud in this market as well. So yeah, I am concerned that China is going to have some type of retaliation that's going to impact our producers here.
And Sue, for you?
Well, I think it is a concern. I think that China knows that if former President Trump gets in as president again, he's going to be tough to deal with. So they expect that. But we're also seeing China buying beef. And of course, out of Brazil, they're buying 95,000 metric tons of beef a week. I think they're doing that because they're getting ready and then also trying to get their economy jump-started too.
All right. Lots of great information. I appreciate both of you joining us this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Darin Fessler and Sue Martin joining us. Just a quick reminder, commodity futures and options do involve a substantial risk of loss, not suitable to all investors. And that's the Nebraska Soybean Board Weekly Market Roundup as we head into the Memorial Day weekend.